Welcome everyone to the 61st Hands-on Agile Meetup. Today we have a very special guest, Fortune Buchholtz, and she will be talking about something really, really exciting. She will be talking about the way that Toyota is actually handling coaching. And as you may imagine, that the company who invented, so to speak, Lean, puts a lot of attention to coaching, which has many, many, many implications. For example, like an excellent product quality. I don't know whether you've ever been driving a Toyota, but this is really the level of quality you want to have from such a product. And I'm very, very curious to learn more about how this works. And I'm really happy that Fortune made it possible that we will get a first impression about how this whole Toyota thingy works as far as coaching is concerned.
All right. So hello, my name is Fortune Buchholtz. I think most of you here probably know me. I've been doing Agile since 2006, internationally, starting in Silicon Valley, from Wall Street and on into Europe. Like any Scrum Master and Agile coach, I'm extremely interested in coaching and how we can use coaching to improve innovation, problem solving, and to actually make continuous improvement work. And that's why I'm interested in looking at Toyota. As we all know, Toyota excels in innovation, problem solving, and especially continuous improvement. Many of our Scrum practices come from the Toyota Lean kind of background, since many of our practices are rooted in the famous Harvard Business Review essay, The New Product Game by Takeuchi and Nonaka, which was so influential to Jeff Sutherland and Ken Schwaber in the Scrum invention. So let's go ahead and get started. Now, the first part I want to talk about is coaching, right? So for a long time, I personally found as an Agile coach that I would go to management and coach, and they would think that coaching was some kind of fluffy extra that's a nice to have, but they didn't really have time to do what they would call navel gazing. But what we have here now in the past 2 or 3 years is a massive sea change in management. And we can even see this in the dreaded McBoston. McKinsey itself, the ultimate consulting firm, issued a report in January 22 in People and Organizational Performance, where they said exactly this, right? How do we find innovative ways to identify and drive forward new solutions? How do we empower teams as opposed to just telling them what to do? And their solution is the key success factor is coaching. We must empower people and spend more time on high quality coaching interactions, right? So even McKinsey now admits that coaching is essential and vital to a successful organization. This is something, of course, that Toyota has known for literally decades. Now, there are many ways to coach, and there are many common Agile coaching methodologies, right? If you have a certification as an Agile coach from the ICA Agile, or if you're an enterprise coach from ICF or ICA Agile, then you have probably learned all of these methodologies. If you're a Scrum Master, you maybe have learned 1 or 2 of these formal methodologies, and you may use them with your teams or with individuals. But I'm not here to talk about any of these common professional and personal coaching methods. Though Bob Galen of Badass Agile Coaching often suggests we add more life coaching skills into Agile coaching, I'm here to say, let's talk about a form of performance coaching, a form of coaching that builds a meta skill that creates scientific thinking that drives the adoption of Agile mindset and thus the creation of Agile behaviors and an Agile culture in the workplace. So I'm not going to be talking so much about the life coaching aspect, but more about how Toyota onboards people, builds people, develops people, and shows respect for people by teaching them this meta skill of scientific thinking, which we call Toyota Kata. We've already gathered that coaching is key, and we should all be doing more coaching. Managers should be doing coaching. The organization should be coaching itself at all levels, between all levels. And this is exactly what you see at Toyota. But the question is what form of coaching will actually achieve the goal that McKinsey seeks of finding innovative ways to identify and drive forward solutions? Okay, so first, when we say what solution are we aiming for, right? It doesn't matter what organization we're working in or what method of Agile or flavor of Agile or spin of Agile that we're using, right? We're all sharing the same goals, right? We all want to set clear and inspirational goals or a product vision. We want to visualize and limit work in progress. We need to shorten feedback loops, create this culture of continuous learning, experimenting, and improvement, continuous improvement for innovation. And then this will allow us to discover and release customer value early. These are the goals that every organization in this current VUCA or volatile and uncertain environment should have. And Kata deliberately supports all of these goals, even though it's not specifically aimed at these goals. And that's because this meta skill, as I said, of scientific thinking naturally moves people through a process that enables all of these things to happen. So what does Kata mean? Okay, of course, Kata is a term from martial arts. It means the basic practice movements. And you may have seen this if you do a Tai Chi, karate, Aikido, judo. If you do yoga, right, the sun salutation poses that you do before you begin your yoga flow are also a kind of kata. They're basic, repeated, deliberately practiced movements. And so this is what we're going to do with kata, right? Just as we practice our other martial arts or our yoga basic forms every day, we're going to practice kata on a daily basis. We're going to build strength and flexibility in people's thinking. And this is the core basis of what makes you agile, right? The agile mindset, being flexible, being fluid, but also having strong values and a strong vision. Again, we're going to do deliberate practice. This is what's unique about the kata, is we're practicing these forms deliberately and on a daily basis. So when we think back to the other coaching methods, the OSKAR, the GROW, the STEPPA, right? We want to compare them and to how they are going to fit with what we want to do in Agile. Are they explicitly driving the meta skill of scientific thinking and behavior? And is it measurable? Are they explicitly aimed at building individuals and teams into innovative leaders? Remember, this is the whole goal of people who work at Toyota, right? Is you may start on the line, but the goal of Toyota is to grow you into a leader so that everyone in Toyota is seen, no matter what your official title, is going to be a leader and they're seen as leaders. Are they flexible methods? Can we use them for business leaders, teams, and personal development as well, right? You can use kata in your family for your own life, as I have, and you'll get the same wonderful benefit. Will it explicitly create a learning organization, right? This is crucial to those of us in Agile, is that we're striving to build a socio-technological learning organization where we do constant experiments to find better ways to deliver customer value. And this is something that Kata can do for us, both for individuals and a group, in a way that I think none of the other common coaching methods do. Is it easy to learn? Do you have to go to the full 6, 8, 10, 12, 16-week coaching course to get the certification to do the practice coaching? No, you do not. You can actually really learn the Toyota Kata Coaching in as little as, I would say, probably 8 weeks, but 9 weeks to 12 weeks would be better. It's very fast, it's very easy to learn, and you don't need to shell out for an expensive certification. Further, it's self-documenting. This is very important because management wants to know what the team is doing with its time, and also it allows you to keep track of what people have been learning, how they've been experimenting, and it gives people a record of what they've been doing so they can see their own growth, which is very rewarding. So the kata is called Toyota Kata because it's a method used by Toyota to develop people and solve business problems. But as I said, they don't use kata in the way I'm going to present it to you today. They have their own method called the Toyota Business Practices. Coaching has been built in, as I said at the beginning, to the culture of Toyota since the Second World War. And as a result, they don't need to teach it in this explicit way because they have this whole culture that's grown up about it. But those of us who are coming new into an organization or coming into an organization that's attempting to transform, part of our goal is to build a new culture, is to encourage a new culture. And so this method of the Toyota Kata, this explicit practice, which they don't really have to do at Toyota in the same way, is going to help us get to the same goals and the same ends that Toyota does. So the first thing that we want to know about Toyota and coaching is it's a top to bottom coaching culture, right? And it has long viewed coaching as management. When you work at Toyota, your manager is your coach, right? And it's the same thing all the way up. So your manager's manager coaches your manager. Your manager's manager is coached by the director. The director is coached by the vice president, right? The vice president is coached by the CEO or the CEO's official coach. And then when the CEO and the other senior leadership go visit the factory, that is, as we say, go to the Gemba, when they go tour the workplace, they're coached by the frontline workers, right? They actually tour the visual management boards that everyone on the front line has, and the frontline workers teach and tell and coach the senior leadership on what is happening in the factory, what the problems are, and what the impediments are, right? So this is really great. They have a whole virtuous cycle of coaching so that they can deliver better customer value in a humanistic way. And this is what we call Kaizen, right? We're going to do this coaching as a series of experiments to solve a challenge, and we're going to gather empirical data and report it on a Miro board. It's really very simple. It's easy to do, but it will allow us to take baby step by baby step through a series of tiny experiments to solve challenges that will improve value. Now, the Toyota Kata as we know it today, right, comes from Mike Rother. He comes from the University of Michigan. He was a student of Jeff Liker. If you are very immersed in the Toyota production system or the lean background, you know that Jeff Liker is and has been for a long time one of the most prominent teachers and professors of the Toyota production system and of the lean culture and lean methodology. So Mike went and studied the coaching culture at Toyota. He studied it for 6 years. He wrote a big report, and he's written a number of books about it. He was interested not in just uncovering the common tools that we know, like 5S or finding waste, right? Or measuring flow or looking at cycle time and lead time. He wanted to understand how the management thought and how the management acted and how the management grew employees to create this culture and to sustain this culture. So this is why he studied the management practices, he studied their coaching culture, and he discovered that coaching is in fact the secret sauce to Toyota's success. If we look at the many people who have tried to copy Toyota. I know I've worked in a lot of places that have said they were lean, that use lean tools, that had operational excellence departments, but they did not manage to get the same kind of results that Toyota had. And they eventually became very frustrated, and many of them gave up. And that's because they didn't have this all-important coaching component, right? It's doing the lean practices, using the lean tools with coaching that will give you the Toyota level of success. Right? So since Mike Rother wrote his series of books, his first one came out in the early 2000s. And I think you'll find that there are a lot of cutting edge leaders in the technology sector in Silicon Valley, such as Joe Justice, who talk about Kata coaching and are using Kata. I believe that Melissa Perry, the famous product leader, is also using Toyota Kata culture and Toyota Kata coaching with her team. So it's definitely out there in the Agile environment. I think it's been picking up steam since before the pandemic, and now we're seeing it really arrive fully fledged on the Agile scene, right? So no matter what industry you may be in, I assume that most of you here are probably in technology, but maybe not all of you. No matter what business you are in, if you need a learning culture with continuous improvement, if you need to train people how to think so they can adapt and turn like sunflowers to face the direction that customers are going in this volatile market, then Toyota Kata is for you. So what is the Toyota Kata? Now, I've talked a lot about it in abstract. It's a 4-step process. So first of all, we're going to set a challenge. You notice I don't call it a problem. right? One of the interesting things about the Toyota Kata is it has a very positive and optimistic focus. In fact, many of the challenges that you see people set for themselves in the Toyota Kata start with the words, "What would it be wonderful if," right? So, for example, you may see people who work, say, in a bread factory. This is a very famous example of the use of Toyota Kata in the United States, is Zingerman's mail order. They had a very famous experiment, how to improve the packing and wrapping of bread for shipment so they could meet their cycle time, right? And what they wanted to do was, do a series of experiments using the Kata to see how they could remove the waste, improve the process, and meet their cycle time, complete all of the bread and ship the bread according to the beat of the takt. So their challenge started is, wouldn't it be wonderful if we could wrap a loaf of bread in 9 seconds or less and put it in a basket? Okay, so people are going to get bread, right, from the Kanban. They're going to wrap the bread. They're going to tag the bread with the person's name, and they're going to put it in a bread basket and send it down the line. And can we do this in 9 seconds or less? Okay, so that's the challenge. Wouldn't it be wonderful if we could do this? You can see that this is already much different than the idea of just having a problem statement, right? We have an optimistic goal that we look forward to, right? So then what we do is we grasp the current condition. We take a step back. We have our North Star goal, then we take a step back. We step backwards. We slow down to go fast. We grasp the current condition. We study exactly what our process is in some detail. And we make a very simple process map, nothing fancy, not a full steam value stream map, but just a simple series of sticky notes where we understand exactly what our current process is and say how long, it takes to do each particular step. And then we say, where can we choose one of these parts of the process, zoom in on it, and try to make an experiment to improve that one part? And then we make our experiment. We come back every day. We say, this is the experiment I want to do. This is the experiment that I think will have this result. And then the experiment I did yesterday, this is how it came out. And this is what I've learned. So every day we're reporting on what we did yesterday. This may sound familiar to you. What we're going to do today, what we think are going to happen, but most importantly, what we have learned from our experience in the last 24 hours. All right? And then after we have made our experiment, right, we've grasped the current condition, we've made our experiment, we've decided that we're going in the right direction, so we're going to set a target condition. What is one larger step we can take that will get us towards our challenge, right? We know exactly what's going in our process. We've focused in and chosen a process. We've examined it. We've made some experiments. Now we're going to know which experiment or which feature, you might say, we're going to target. And then we move forward. So we go forward repetitively over and over again in these baby steps, moving from target condition to target condition through a series of experiments until we have finally made our challenge come true. And then at the end, we do what's called a summary reflection. We ask ourselves, what have we learned? So how exactly does this daily coaching cycle go? Okay, what's great about the Toyota Kata is that it's a very lightweight coaching cycle. It happens every day for 15 minutes. You can use it with a team. You can use it with an individual. You can use it with executives for the transformation, right? So I use a Miro board. I think a lot of people do. You can see that there's a standard lean canvas form. This is called the learner's storyboard. We have the name of the focus process. Remember, I said after we've grasped the current condition, we choose the target condition, right? What is it that we want to fix? How does it we want to change this process that we have grasped, right? And then we make these experiments. So you can see here an example of how I've used the Miro board from my own personal challenge, which was learning to take my medicine on time. I have Like a lot of people, I have a series of medications that I am supposed to take at set times during the day, and I often fail to do so. So I actually did a challenge for myself to learn how to take these medications on time. This meant that I mapped out my day in a very lightweight way with all of my activities, who was involved in the activities, where I did the activities. And then I formed the target condition, my ideal state, a condition that would allow me to function so that I would take all of my medicines on time and meet my challenge. But of course, it's hard to leap from one process to a totally new process. So instead, I baby stepped my way. And every day I came in with a new idea of what it was I would try to do to get to the place where I could take my medications on time every day. And I wrote down, what it was I needed to do, what experiment I wanted to make, what I expected to happen, right? And then I also went off, I did that experiment, I came back, and the next day I updated with what actually happened as opposed to what I thought would happen. I discussed this with my coach in the coaching cycle, and then I formed my next baby step towards the next day. So it's a series of scientific thinking, right? I'm going to look at the situation, look at my data, gather the data. I'm going to create a hypothesis or a prediction. I'm going to conduct an experiment, and then I'm going to report my progress or report my data, right? This is why we say that it's a method that teaches scientific thinking, because it's essentially a method of empiricism where I, formulate these hypotheses, and then I conduct experiments, and I gather my learning. So here I have my daily experimenting record. Here I talk about how my experiments correlate with my Agile goals or my Agile principles. You can drop stickies for this as well. I also have run charts. I made little charts in Excel of the times I took my medicine. And if you just quickly glance even at the slide, you can see that over time I had a lot of variation. But after only a relatively few short cycles, my variation smoothed out, and I was in fact taking all of my medication on time. So I can tell you from personal experience, the Toyota Kata actually works. And when you run into obstacles, of course, you have an obstacles parking lot, and the coach will help you solve your obstacles, choose one to focus on, and coach you towards removing your own impediments. Okay, so this is the learner's side, right? This is what I do when I'm working on a challenge, when I am the learner. The coach, however, of course, is doing the coaching, and they have a specific coaching process. They ask 5 questions. So in this way, it's kind of like the old-fashioned, not-so-good daily stand-up process where you have 3 questions. But here we have 5 questions. And here the 5 questions are deliberate because we want the coach and the learner both to ingrain the habit of constantly asking themselves these questions as they devise their experiments. And this keeps them from going off track and from falling into rabbit holes. So the first few times that you're a learner, maybe the first 3 or 4 challenges that you do, you're going to want to do it in the shu-ha-ri way. You're going to want to do the basic kata and the basic formats. Then you will have mastered them for your next 2 or 3 challenges. And then later you will reach the re-stage where you will be able to create your own questions and customize the kata to your own organization and your own situation. So again, the shu-ha-ri model is one that's commonly used in Scrum. I know it's a favorite of Stefan's and it's a favorite of mine. And we use the shu-ha-ri method also in Kata Coaching. And the shu method, the shu process, looks like these 5 questions. So the coach just simply asks you to recite your challenge, right? Wouldn't it be wonderful if I could wrap a loaf of bread for delivery in 9 seconds or less? What is the target condition? The target condition is working on getting the wrappers in place so that I don't have to search for them, but can just pick one up with my left hand while I put the loaf of bread in with my right hand. How do I make sure I always have a ready supply of bread wrappers, for example? What is the actual condition now? The actual condition now is that I don't have enough bread wrappers. My Kanban for getting the bread wrappers to me isn't working, and I need to work on getting the flow of bread wrappers so I can wrap the bread more quickly. What are my obstacles, right? What are keeping you from having your Kanban of bread wrappers, your proper flow of bread wrappers. And that's something you can go investigate. Which of these obstacles will you address first? Then what is your next step? What are you going to try to improve the flow of bread wrappers, right? How quickly can we go see? And the answer, of course, is always the next morning when you have your next coaching session, right? And finally, what have you learned from taking the step? So it's focused not so much on telling people what to do. It's not focused on blaming people because they don't have the bread wrappers that they need or because their process isn't working right. It's always seen as a series of experiments that lead to learning. And this is why it's so appropriate to Agile, where learning is what we try to do in a Scrum team or Agile team. So I've used the Kata Coaching myself several times in 2 organizations. And I think I've had 3 particular scenarios that I'd quickly like to tell you about. So scenario 1 is for problem solving. And of course, this is about a platform team that I had where I was working at an insurance company, a pre-IPO insurance company. They had a problem where automated customer response emails were not going out correctly. The text was totally garbled. Of course, they're working in silos and not a value stream. So the customer comms team heard the customer complaints, immediately jumped to the conclusion that the database must be corrupt, filed a support ticket to the database team. The database team found no issues. Comms insisted that they had to find the issue. It had to be in the database. And thus we got into the cycle of blame, accusation, shame, and impasse. The managers got involved. They had to disable all automated customer responses and post an apology on the website. So this was no bueno. Now, what I suggested we do instead was a quick lightning kata round where I took a senior dev and I asked them to investigate using kata. We gathered a small group to work with them to think the issue through. We tried to grasp the current condition. How actually did those customer emails flow out? What was their full life cycle? Where did the data come from? Where did the data go? How could the data possibly be garbled, right? We went through your classic Ishikawa fishbone and a 5 whys. They quickly identified the true root causes. They chose one as most likely, and we began the kata process to experiment on how we could fix that cause, right? And then in only 2 experiments, they were able to solve the issue within 36 hours. When, management and QA wanted to know what the fix was and how we had arrived at that, it was very simple to tell them that because, of course, the Miro board is self-documenting, right? All the documentation was there, and all I had to do was use the Miro AI feature to write out the text from the Miro board and present that as documentation. The second scenario that I used it also very recently was that the team was not conversant in many tools. They're a Windows team. They were using still C#4. They were using rather old technology, as is common in some mature businesses. But one of the feature requirements from the customer specifically asked for a Linux technology to use a container called Docker, which would hold the database in the cloud. And this was something that they didn't know how to do. They were a Windows team used to old technology. They didn't know very much, or if any, Linux. They weren't particularly familiar with the cloud. And so they declared a spike, which you would expect a good Scrum team to do. And they divided the work among themselves, I think, in an admirable way. They found a course. 3 of them agreed to take the course. The other 2 continued with the sprint work, right? Then the 3 who had taken the course in Docker met. They looked at the feature. They made a story map to see how they could apply their new knowledge. They worked with an architect, the product owner, and the BA, right? They estimated that work, and then they took on the stories and did a peer pair programming to complete the work. The rest of the team then went back to completing the Scrum task. The pair went through the kata process to think through each experiment, each step as they were learning to implement the Docker. And they went through all of their obstacles. And then they got the minimally completed feature that they needed to get done in the planned program increment or PI planning time box. So that was a really successful use of the kata in which the team basically taught themselves Docker and solved their own problem of, getting this new technology in the cloud and getting it working within 6 weeks. The last one is more of a personal challenge, right? And this is where a project manager that I was working with talked about her facilitation skills. And she came to me because she didn't, really do much facilitation. She held a lot of meetings, but there wasn't a lot of engagement. And she had decided that she was a terrible facilitator. And of course, if you use the OSKAR coaching method, right, you can work with people to develop skills using OSKAR. But to my mind, the I'm just a is often a sign of a fixed mindset. So when you go through the OSKAR method, the K stands for know-how, right? And so I asked her sort of in an OSKAR way, what know-how did she need? Right? And she just said she needed to learn some facilitation techniques. She needed to learn how to be a facilitator. She identified her obstacle was that she had no training budget left, right? She asked me to switch my stance, to become a mentor, to suggest options. So I suggested several, and one of which was to try the liberating structures. So we did a kata set of work where she would experiment and try various liberating structures with her meetings, create simple strings, hold simple conversation cafes, right? And she very quickly learned the liberating structures because, of course, they're quick, fun, and easy to do. This gave her a lot of confidence. She reported that her meetings improved. And most of all, at the end of the coaching cycle, of the Kata coaching cycle, she had completely changed her mindset from, I'm a terrible facilitator, to I can do this. And this is the great success, right? Yes, she learned the liberating structures. Her experiments worked, right? So she was a successful experimenter, but mostly she completely changed her self-image of herself and became much more effective in her job. I'd like to stop for a moment here and take some questions. Is that okay, Stefan, before we go on with the more resources portion?
Absolutely. So we have 3 questions. Let me start with those. I'll post them to the chat. The first one, Toyota Coaching is top to bottom. Does feedback from the bottom go directly to the top?
Yes, absolutely. If you do the Toyota style or the virtuous circle of cultural coaching, yes, the top will go, the CEO, the senior management team, will do what they call a genbu genbutsu. That is, they go visit the factory, they go visit the teams. And when they are visiting the teams, as you may know, they stand in the circle and observe. They see what's happening in the process, usually for an hour. Taichi Ono used to draw a circle, right, and make the executives stand in it and just watch for an hour and draw a diagram of what they saw. This forces the senior executives to really learn what's going on in the factory. And you see that they're grasping the current condition when they make notes of their observations of the process. Then the group leader, which in Toyota is the equivalent of the Scrum Master for the team, will take the executives through all of the visual management boards that the front line, the team is using. And then at the end, the frontline workers will actually speak directly to the CEO and tell him what their experiences are, what they think their problems are, and what suggestions for improvement that they have, right? And so then they will coach him on what needs to change and will ask explicitly for his help to remove impediments by coaching him on what the impediments are and coming to hold him accountable for what experiments he may have done last time, for what learnings he may have from them from his previous experiments of removing their impediments and improving the process overall from his, higher perspective.
Oh, let's have the second one. Grasp the initial condition. Is it a scientific basement measurement? Doesn't it foster biases or gaming the metric, aka the measure at the end of the experiment? Arne is really curious about this.
Now, here's what's really great is because this is coaching, right? We are going to be working in a no blame, no shame environment, right? When we admit that we're doing scientific thinking, that we're in a hypothesis-driven process, right? Failed experiments are just as important, if not more so, than successful experiments, right? So actually, there's no incentive to game the system because as long as you learn something, right, you're a winner. If you try an experiment and it doesn't work, that's great, right? Now we know what doesn't work, and now we try something new. There's no blame, there's no shame in this system. We're just baby stepping away towards fulfilling our target conditions that will take us closer to our challenge, right? So we're just making a neutral observation, and there's no judgment whatsoever. So I always work very hard to make sure that we are in a psychologically safe environment, and there's no need to gain false favor by faking your data or, presenting some kind of rosy scenario, right? But I do agree that like all coaching, there has to be a level of trust and empathy and even compassion between the coach and the learner and between management and the coach to let this process play out fairly. Does that make sense? Does that address the question?
Sounds good. So, question number 3. What recommendations do you have to present this kata to a manager that suggests Scrum Masters need to be less coachy and more delivery focused?
Dude, don't I hear it? And this is what I want to say, right? Because so much life coaching, and I'm going to apologize in advance to those of you here who may do a lot of life coaching. Life coaching has its place and its time. But when we're working within sprint or within program increments, if you're doing, Scrum at scale or some kind of process that has an obey a room style planning, delivery is important. And it's true, I don't really necessarily have 6 months to work with you to gaze at your navel. So I completely understand, management's fear of that. However, when I hear a manager say that, I immediately present them with the McKinsey report. McKinsey thinks coaching is the most important part of making an organization successful. If you return to my second slide, the winning organizations are those that have the greatest number of high-quality coaching interactions. So it's not that coaching is fluffy. Coaching is essential to management in a VUCA environment. And I have the McKinsey report that you can kindly, with a smile on your face, hand that manager, right? This is what McKinsey says we're going to do. Even the Evil MBA McKinsey thinks that fluffy coaching is the way forward. But the Toyota Kata, as you noticed, isn't just fluffy coaching. It collects a lot of data. It's extremely empirical. It supports the empiricism of the Agile process. And you notice it's action-oriented. Every day, you have to have a different experiment. Every day, you're going to report your data. Every day, you're going to create learning, right? So I'm going to make a bunch of micro improvements day by day by day, which is going to boost my performance and the performance of the team. Does that answer your question?
Yes, it does. Thank you very much. And your little laugh when you started answering actually made me giggle as well. It's a bane of my life as well.
Dude, I hear it all the time, right? I hear a lot of MBA managers say coaching's a waste of time. And then I'm like, oh, so I'm sure that you learned that coaching is coaching is an important part of the science of management, didn't you? And they'll say, no, we didn't hear about it in my MBA. And then I come and take this nice, McKinsey report, and I just say, here, read this. I know that you want to be a better manager and use state-of-the-art management techniques.
If you could share that would be very, very handy. Only because we have some McKinsey people here at the moment. So it might be nice to actually show that.
Absolutely. So I understand that if you have MBA managers, and most people do, The MBA managers were taught a certain process. You go hire a consultant. The consultant will be the expert. They will tell you what to do because, of course, the little people couldn't know. But the secret of the McKinsey is that they go ask the little people what to do, and then they write a report with their authority that reports what the little people say to do, right? So we can shortcut this whole process through coaching. You see, the Toyota Kata Coaching will do for itself everything that they hired McKinsey to try to do for you.
And the cool thing about McKinsey is that the interviews are run by the juniors and they pay the daily fee of the seniors for them.
Exactly.
We need to move on. Question 4. Do workers in the factory really coach the management? Isn't that many to few scaling problem? I presume this is not coaching in the usual way we understand it.
It is actually coaching, but then Toyota Kata Coaching is not coaching in the traditional Agile coaching method, which has a lot of process, teaching, and life coaching mixed together. The frontline definitely coaches the management in that they ask management what management has been doing from their last visit, what the management has learned from this visit, and based on both the outcome of what they learned from the last visit and what they've learned from this visit, what they're going to do next to help the workers improve the factory process. So yes, there is this kind of deliberate coaching by the front line. Particularly, you'll see this in healthcare. In healthcare uses, I think Baptist Memorial Hospital in the United States is beginning to start Kata coaching, where the nurses are coaching management and the management is coaching in the full circle. So yes, there is some accountability in this way between the front line and management. Although, as I said, in Toyota itself, they don't use this formal Kata method. They have their own cultural method called the Toyota Business Practices. But that's ingrained in their culture, and they've had a chance to develop this culture over many years. Whereas we have to start new, so we need this more formal process. Does that address the question?
It did. Thank you.
Remember, the management usually comes through the factory maybe once a month. So it's not something that they have to do every day.
Question number 5. Curious about your emphasis on women in this slide.
Oh, yes. It's an interesting thing about Toyota Kata. Currently, there's a huge shortage of Toyota Kata coaches throughout the world as Toyota Kata is growing and catching fire through all kinds of industries. People are crying out for coaches. The Toyota Kata advanced coaching cycle is not just the learner and the coach, but the coach will also have a coach known as a second coach. So there's a great need for coaches in Toyota Kata. And for some reason, currently, the people who are the most active coaches are women. That's just an interesting state of play at the moment. I think it may be that many women who are in manufacturing and other industries who have been managers and team leaders have gone to study coaching under the influence of the Toyota methodology. I think it's just a fluke that we currently have. But it is a growing coaching career that's open to everyone. And I hope that addresses the question.
Thank you, Did.
Hey, last question. You said the 5 questions are shoot style. How
Yes.
do you do ha and re?
So for ha, there are a series of deepening questions that you can ask. And if you're interested in the ha stage, I'm happy to come back and give another talk about what the ha stage looks like. So you don't ask just the 5 questions, but then you go ahead and you ask a series of deepening questions to carry the learner farther into the challenge and to develop this meta skill of scientific thinking to improve their ability to analyze their own data and make better predictions. The re-stage is when you are able to just freestyle it a little more. And I hope that makes sense.
It does. Thanks.
Shall we wrap up with this slide before we answer the 1 or 2 questions that are left?
Absolutely. So one of the great things about Toyota Kata, as I mentioned at the beginning, is that you don't need to spend 5,000 or 10,000 pounds, dollars, euros to take a coaching class and to get a certification and join the great certification mill. The Kata coaching methodology is to avoid the certification mill because the Kata coaches think that certification mills are bad. And I think that's something we ourselves have probably experienced in Agile. And so as a result, there are a large number of volunteers who teach Kata for free. And they have organized a number of global Kata schools. And if you go to kata-school.org, you will find all of the currently known volunteer free Kata schools. They often meet online, and you can go join them, learn Kata, take your place in line, be a learner, and eventually grow to be a Kata coach. One of the most influential Kata schools is, in fact, just for women and women-identified people. That means if you happen to be a trans woman, you're also welcome to the Kata Girl Geeks. And they're very active, they're very large, and they're really driving, as I said, the Kata movement today because most Kata coaches are. And the last thing I want to say is if you're interested in more Kata resources, of course, there are books. Here are the books by Mike Rother, who did the original research at Toyota. Toyota Kata, the first book, is sort of a summation of his research. The Toyota Kata Practice Guide tells you exactly how to practice the Kata. The Toyota Kata Culture, called the Orange Book, teaches and shows the cycle of full organizational coaching, management to frontline, and frontline to management. A simpler book for people who don't know so much about Toyota and are not manufacturing focused is Sylvain Landry's Bringing Scientific Thinking to Life. He's a business professor from Quebec. And then there's, of course, also the German novel written by Thilo Schwartz, who's a famous Kata coach and an engineering expert and professor in Augsburg. And he wrote this novel called Giving Wings to Her Team. Again, this is about a woman who learns to become a Kata coach to improve her manufacturing factory and improve her problems that she has on her production line. I think that because this book is written from a woman's perspective is probably one of the reasons that so many women have become Kata coaches at this time. Then if you are more of a visual person, here's a 66-page graphic novel which shows wonderfully the Toyota Kata coaching process in Zingerman's, the mail order food store in the United States. And that's really a great book that I recommend to a lot of people. And it's really an easy read and it's extremely educational. So the last thing that I want to say, of course, like closing words, is going to be that Agile gives us the space to innovate, and Kata is the vaulting pole that lifts us along the obstacles we meet along the way so that we can make the ideas for innovation real. And that said, I'm all done. Stefan, I'm sorry we've gone 4 minutes over. Can we continue? Do you want to take more questions?
A classic, always happens. There are
I'm
two
so
questions
sorry.
left. Shall we take those on? So one
Yes,
would
let's.
be curious if you have ways to integrate Agile and Kata so it doesn't feel like more meetings that are not valuable.
Exactly. So the beautiful thing is that it's only 15 minutes, right? I'm not going to drag you into an all-afternoon sprint planning, right? Nor is everyone going to be involved in a Kata coaching cycle all the time, right? Certain teams or certain people may have short or small problems. For example, the scenario that I initially gave you dealt with a spike. So that was a 1 week, coaching session, right? So they had an extra 15-minute meeting for 1 week. And then once they solved the problem, did their learning, implemented the doctor, it was done, right? We didn't do any more Kata coaching until the next challenge came along. So you can see we have short, sharp coaching cycles that are very narrowly focused, that are no more than 15 or 20 minutes. And when they're done, they're done. Does that address the question?
It does, thank you.
Sure.
And the final one. How does a company make sure that the bottom people coaching the top aren't intimidated?
Oh, that's great. So when you do it in the full Orange Book or cultural style, what happens is that the executives will be accompanied by the first coach, their coach, the second coach, and the team leader, which is the equivalent of the Scrum Master, right? So there are a lot of people there to buffer the team and to support the team. Also, in Toyota, the executives have long been taught, and this is a dictum of the Toyota organization, which we have adopted, I think, in Scrum, since Jeff Sutherland mentions it in his book, Scrum from First Principles, how impressed he was by Toyota, is that we view the dev team and the frontline workers as the experts, right? That is the view in Toyota, right? The frontline people are the people who know what the work is, they know what the value is, and they create the value. The job of the managers is simply to enable the delivery of value. That is, Toyota views its managers as servant leaders. They say they have an enabling bureaucracy. So executives at Toyota show up in a different way, right? They don't show up as bullying bosses, right? They show up as servant leaders, is what we would in Scrum call servant leaders. And this is a cultural thing that Toyota has created as it develops people to become managers. And they do it through coaching. And this is something that those of us who go into organizations as Agile coaches really have to work with management on as we begin to develop this full cultural coaching, right? Is first of all, we have to help the leadership learn how to show up in a new way and to respect the developers, to respect the people on the front lines, and to understand that they are the experts and the management is the enabler and not vice versa. All right, Stefan, what else is on the plate?
Watson, that was great. That was really awesome. So thank you very much for spending your evening with us and sharing the secrets to Toyota Kata. Thank you for being here, and have a great week.
Great. Thank you so much for coming. I'm very grateful for your time.